Good evening, everyone. We are going to show you how we made a Lowery type cross stitch stand. It functioned just like the Lowery stand does, but all of our parts came from either Lowe's, Tractor Supply, or Fastenal, which was the closest place to us we could find the adjustment levers. So my husband's going to show you the parts, about how much we paid for them, and how to assemble it.
Okay, this is going to be part of the clamp. It is a 10-inch mending plate. I'm going to be cutting it because it doesn't need to be 10 inches long.
And it was how much?
It was $248.
And these are our local Lowe's, and we live in a small town, Oklahoma.
And this is a piece of 1.5 by 1.5 inch slotted angle iron. It's galvanized steel. It's a foot long. It was $3.36. I have a piece of 1/2 inch by 3 foot long weldable steel tube. It is hollow. I will be bending this to make the adjustable bar for the stand.
And it was how much?
It was $7.12.
I think that is the most expensive part.
I believe so, yes. For the upright and the adjustable bar on the clamp, we're going to be using some 1/2 inch EMT electrical conduit. This piece is 2 foot long. It's what was left after I made Lava's first stand. This is going to make mine a little bit shorter than hers, or a little less adjustment than hers, but I'm going to cut about 6 inches off of one end of it to use for the clamp. The rest of it is going to be my vertical upright. I'm going to use a steel set screw connector for 1/2 inch EMT conduit. One side has an opening for the conduit with a set screw. The other side is threaded. Normally, you would use this nut to attach it to an electrical box, but we are going to screw it into a 1/2 inch galvanized steel pipe flange. The connector was 30 cents at Lowe's. The pipe flange was $4.99 at Tractor Supply. Lowe's also carries these, but they're like $7.50 at Lowe's.
And I believe the piece of conduit we bought was between $2 and $3. And as he said, we've already made one stand out of it.
Yeah, the conduit was, I believe, about $2.25 was how much it cost. It might have even been less. For the adjustable ends on the conduit, I'm going to be using 2 of these 3 1/2 inch set screw couplings for EMT steel conduit. One end will go, one side will be set screwed down onto the conduit. The other side, I'm going to replace the screw with our adjustment levers that we bought from Fastenal. The adjustment levers, Fastenal was the only place we could find them. They were $1.95 each. We ordered 4 of them because we knew we were going to use them for 2 stands. They actually cost more for Fastenal to ship them to our local store so I could pick them up than the parts themselves cost. but that's what we're going to use for the adjustments to be able to loosen them by hand.
Now, originally we had little knobs, and I found I don't have as much hand strength as he does. So sometimes, especially if I was trying to tighten them with my non-dominant hand, it was harder for me to get them set good.
These are the knobs she's talking about. They are 3/16 threaded stud knobs. As you can see, they're rather small. They're a little smaller than a quarter. If you've got good hand strength, you can use these. These were bought at Lowe's. They were about 50 cents a piece, I believe. We are going to be using the lever screws because they're easier to work. The couplings for the conduit were $1.48 for a pack of 3. Normally, most of the time you can also get these in single packs, just one a piece, which according to the sticker on the shelf at Lowe's, they're like 48 cents that way. They just didn't have any in stock, so I had to get the 3-pack. That's going to leave one extra one after making my stand. We also have an extra one for making lavas, but since I couldn't get just one, we're going to use the 3-pack. And on the clamp, for the adjustment in the clamp, to tighten it up, we're going to use a 5/16 by 1 3/4 inch adjustment knob. Pretty simple.
And even with having less hand strength, I have no problem adjusting that one at all.
Yeah, this one is almost 2 inches, about 2 inches across for the knob itself. So it gives plenty of adjustment. I'm going to be fabricating the clamp, as I said, out of the angle iron that I will cut in half. The mending plate that I will cut from the ends down so that I can drill a hole in the center of it and it be centered on the bar. As you can see, the holes that are already in the bar for it to be used as a mending plate are offset so that you don't split out the wood when you use it for that, but we're not using it for that. So I have a 5/16 by 18 thread nut, hex nut, that fits on the knob, on the screw on the knob. This will be affixed to the outside of the clamp in line with one of the holes in the slotted angle iron. I'm going to braze this in place with a brazing torch and a brass brazing rod. You can use epoxy. Make sure that you use some coarse sandpaper, about 80 grit works, to roughen up the surface of the angle iron and to roughen up the side of the nut where you're going to be placing the epoxy, so the epoxy has something to grip onto. And also I will be using a 1/2 inch flat washer and a 5/16 flat washer as part of the assembly for the clamp, as well as a 5/16 E-clip on the end of the bolt. I will also be using a 5/16 carriage bolt. This one is longer than what I actually need. This one, I believe, is 3.5 inches long. You only need about 2 inches. This, as well as a nut, is what is going to hold the two pieces of angle iron together to create the boxed U shape, and also to provide a mounting platform to the conduit, which can be done with a high-grade epoxy, or if you know someone who knows how to weld, they can do that for you. That would be the very best option.
An option for welding is to contact your local high school in their shop class. A lot of times you can take smaller projects like this in, and they'll be happy to let someone who's learning to weld use this as a learning tool.
I also have two, I believe these were number 10 by 1/2 inch wood screws to affix the flange to a piece of 3/4 inch PVC. Actually, that's not 3/4 inch, that's 7/8 inch, I believe.
Plywood.
Plywood that I'm going to use for the base. I could also get and use 1/4 inch steel plate and use machine screws with a countersink on the bottom of the plate and
We
nuts on
did
the flange.
find the steel plate on Amazon for like $20, but we had the leftover plywood, and that's the part that goes under our chair, so we don't really care what it looks like. We also have a couple leftover weight bench weights that we have put on it to add extra weight, because when you pivot it away from yourself to like get out of your chair, especially if you have a bigger project, I found the extra weight very helpful. So now you're...
The 1/2 inch washers were... It was $1.24 for a package of 4 of them. I only need 1. The 5/16 washers were about the same price for a package of either 8 or 10. I had plenty of them around here. I've got a bag here of miscellaneous parts.
I think altogether we've spent about $80, and we're getting both of our stands for that $80.
Right. The nuts that I'm using, I did get at our local lumber yard, because I could go in and pick up however many I needed for a price per item. They were 9 cents a piece. Easy to find. Just most lumber yards you can get these. You can also buy these at Lowe's in bags similar to the washers, and they're usually, I think there's 8 of this size in the bag for around 40 cents, 50 cents.
And Lowe's for us is an hour away. So if we can get this stuff at our local lumber yard that's just 20 minutes, you know, we kind of got some of it there just because it was easier.
You know, for all of these places where I'm going to be either brazing or epoxying things, you can contact your local high school, see if they have a metal shop class or an ag shop class. Either one of those will have welding as part of their course material. Also, check all of your local machine shops. A lot of them have welding equipment. A lot of them do stuff like that. Some of them may be willing to do it for nothing. Some of them may charge you $5 or $10 for the cost of the gas for running the torch for 5 minutes to do it.
We originally had just epoxied everything on my machine or my stand, and the epoxy worked very well. We do have 3 children and 3 dogs. It got hit a lot, bumped a lot. I've moved it from living room to bedroom. So we did decide to go ahead and do the brazen torch. Plus, we are looking at possibly making these for others, and thought that that might be the most sturdy method.
If you would choose to do a steel plate for the base instead of the plywood as we're doing, your local metal shops, machine shops are a good place to look for those. You may be able to get it cheap as a piece of scrap off of some other project they're doing. You won't know unless you go ask. When we started putting the stuff together to do this, that wasn't really an option for me because they were already closed for the day.
And I'm impatient.
Very. Okay, so I'm going to get started by cutting pieces that I need cut.
The tools he's going to be using are his regular cordless drill with an extra battery. He has a hacksaw, a miter box, screwdriver, most tools that you would have around or be able to get fairly cheap if you don't have them. The miter box he's mostly using to hold things. So if you have another way to hold them, you wouldn't necessarily need a miter box.
If you don't have a miter box available, get 2 2x4s and some wood screws. Put them together like this in an L shape and throw a couple of screws in from the shallow side into the long end of the other so that it creates a V base. That is sufficient enough to hold your materials still while you cut them with a hacksaw. As Lava said, I'm using a miter box because I have one available. If you plan on making your own frames for any of your cross stitches, the miter box would be very handy. You can get one for less than $20 at Walmart or Kmart or Lowe's.
He's used that to make our scroll rod frames.
Okay. The first thing I'm going to do is take my angle iron and pretty much cut it in half because I only need it about 6 inches long. I could cut it a little shorter, but I don't need to. I'm just going to cut it in half.
Joe, you got your magnets?
No, I don't, but I can get them.
For easy cleanup with the metal, our 14-year-old son has been collecting the metal bits and using them with different magnets and making different things. So he is very happy to do the metal work cleanup.
Yes, he is. Standard hacksaw with, I believe this is a, this is a 12-inch 24-tooth blade on here. Just a standard metal cutting blade. It zips through pretty quickly. I recommend using a hacksaw. If you have access to a chop saw that you can put a cutting disc for cutting metal on, that would be much quicker and easier. I promise they're not near as tiring on your arm as using a hacksaw.
You'll notice that I'm cutting at the end of the miter box, because if I were to try to cut through the slot on the miter box, the frame of my hacksaw is going to bottom out on the top edge of it before I reach the bottom of my work material. Since I'm just using the miter box to hold it in place, I can cut right here at the end, and the end of it will provide a straight cutting edge.
there's the first cut on my bar. I didn't position that where I wanted it. It's okay. That's just going to work. I'll just go ahead and use that. Okay, I've cut down the bar for my clamp. I did make a mistake and didn't measure, so I cut one side way too short. I'm going to end up using one of the holes that's already there, but that's fine. It'll just center the bar a little farther out so that it clears the bolt in the back that holds everything together. The last thing to cut is our conduit. Like I said, I'm going to cut about 6 inches off of it. Not going to be terribly precise. Conduit's usually the hardest to cut by hand because of the change in the geometry of the metal the entire time you're cutting. Okay. And with that, we're done with all of the cutting. The extra pieces from the bar, I'm going to give to my son to use. He likes to play with them with his magnets.
Cleaning up all the metal shavings.
Okay.
Are you getting quite a few this time?
Yes, I am.
Well, you're not really done yet either, because we still have drilling holes.
Yeah, and that always gives me shavings of a different texture.
Which
Really adds to the variety.
Show your magnet. Okay. Now, are these holes for the adjustment height?
Yes.
Okay, the holes he's gonna drill here are so you can pick how tall or short your stand is. I have found with mine, depending on whether I have the feet out on my recliner or if my feet in, will change my height. And if I take it to my bedroom and sit on my bed and use it, then I need a different height. So this part is, you know, the more adjustment you have on your height, the easier it is to find a comfortable position.
The holes that I'm going to drill, I'm drilling them 9/64 because that is the size of a hole I need to fit this 1/8 inch clip pin into. When you go to look for these, if you buy one like this, it is a hitch pin clip, is what this is called. It's used on the pin that holds a receiver hitch in place on a truck or other vehicle. Receiver hitch, pin goes through it, this goes through the pin to keep it from backing out. That's what we're using as a limiter on the height. I'm drilling the holes about every 2 inches, and any height adjustment in between that is done with the clamp on the top of the bar. But this allows it so that you can loosen it to swing it out of the way to get up out of your chair, and it's not going to drop completely to the bottom of the frame of the pipe. It's going to just drop to whatever level you have that at, and that's where it's going to stay.
And he's just using a regular cordless drill and drill bits that he got. It's not a special drill.
Regular cordless drill. Mine happens to be an 18-volt Black & Decker. That's what I have. Again, just a regular multi-purpose drill bit. These happen to be Boss Stitch brand. I also have Black & Decker ones. I'm going to leave approximately 6 inches at the top. That way it stays stable, even if you happen to extend it to the maximum reach.
Which he's not as worried about having as much on the top adjustment, because we've noticed with mine we don't even use near what it's capable of.
When you're drilling into the conduit, you're going to want to start slow while your drill bit creates the divot to keep it in place. And you'll drill the hole all the way through. Okay. And as with anything in this nature, you always want to test fit. Make sure that your clip pin is going to go through just like that.
We thought the clip pin might be a little safer, considering we do have children and pets that would love to try to pull it out if it slid out easier.
That is correct. I happen to have some sandpaper here in the box from another project. I'm just going to use it to kind of grind off the really rough edges on those holes. There we go. While I have the sandpaper here handy, I'm also gonna quickly smooth off the edges here a little bit. Just so it's not quite so sharp. Doesn't take a whole lot, just enough to take off those little sharp curled edges from cutting.
Now you're about ready to start assembling.
Yep, just about. I'm gonna have my lovely assistant over here come clean up the metal shavings. Okay. I'm now gonna take my piece of plywood that's going to be my base. I'm going to take my flange and I'm going to simply just use a screwdriver and mark where my screws will go to hold my flange down. For the time being, my flange is only going to have 2 screws because that's all I have available at the moment. I didn't think about needing more screws. I'm just going to use the miter box here as a stand to sit this on so I don't drill a hole in my floor.
No, I would not be happy with that.
I'm sure you wouldn't. Helps if I make sure that it's tight. could use the drill for these, but it's not difficult to hand screw these in. That's why I drilled pilot holes. So it's easy to put them in, and so it doesn't split out the wood. Even with just 2 screws, that's not going to go anywhere. Next, we're going to open the 1/2-inch set screw connector. I've found that the screws are often tight to start with. So if you can get them, screw them in, and then back them back out, it just makes it much easier to tighten it once you have it in place and you put your conduit into it. Taking the nut off because we don't need it for this application. Screw this down into the flange. So that it's nice and sturdy and tight. And then I put my conduit in it. I'm lining it up so that my holes for my clip are parallel or perpendicular to the length of the board, because that just makes it seem easier to me for putting the clamp in or the clip in and taking it back out. And you're going to tighten down the set screw just as tight as you can get it, and that is not going anywhere.
Yeah, we found the stand to be very sturdy.
Next, we're going to open the 1/2-inch couplers. Smart using a pocket knife this time. As I mentioned before, I only need 2 of them. Again, I'm going to screw both screws in as far as they will go to clean out the threads on the inside of the coupler. And then I'm going to take 1 screw completely out because, again, we don't need it. We're replacing it with a different screw. I'm putting my coupler on with the set screws to the outside because that is going to put your adjustment lever right here on the outside where you can reach it when you're in your chair, and it's not going to be in your way. You're not going to bump it. It's going to be easy to work with. And again, tighten down the set screw as tight as you can get it. The other one goes for our clamp, which we will assemble that after I build the clamp.
I think that's the hardest part of the whole thing.
It is. lever screw. Make sure it screws in all the way. And then we'll back it outwards. Enough room on the inside for our 90-degree bar to go into. This is our 1/2 inch by 3 foot steel tube. Me, being the oh so big and macho man that I am, I'm just simply going to bend this by hand. If you don't have someone who is able to do that, this is another thing you can take to a machine shop or your local high school's shop class, and they should be able to bend it for you. If they can't, find a male friend that has a pickup with a trailer hitch on it, because that's going to give you a good bend radius for your bend. They can just take it, put it on the back of the hitch in front of it, and then just pull. It'll bend. It's pretty easy to bend.
Oh, that just makes my knee hurt.
There we go. Just like that. Then it slides in. And your adjustment lever clamps down on it, and it doesn't move unless you want it to. And as I'm sure you probably noticed, I ended up getting my connector at the bottom screwed even tighter into my flange. So we're going to back the set screw out a little bit. Rotate the coupler around and tighten it back up. Easy as pie. With these adjustment levers, I really like them. If it happens to tighten down enough that my bar's not going to move and the lever itself's not in the position I want it, I can pull it out, rotate the handle right where I want it. Now, we will start assembly of our clamp. First thing I'm going to do is take the label off the angle iron, because I don't need it there. If you look at your angle iron, you'll see that if you've cut it in half, you'll have a series of long slots and then a round hole on one side. On the other side, it'll be a long slot, a round hole, a long slot, and then another slot the opposite direction, perpendicular to the others. This is the slot we're going to use to assemble the clamp. I'm just using a carriage bolt here. The square at the top of the bolt fits perfectly in that groove. Put the two together. They line up just perfectly. Take an extra washer, throw it on there.
And I've used this clamp with both my Q-snap style frames and my scroll rod frames. and actually a hoop, and it held with all of them.
And then you thread the first nut on here. Joe, would you do 1/2 inch?
Just gotta find
On sewing tables. If you want to, you can also put epoxy in between these before you bolt it together. I don't find it necessary, but again, you can if you want to. Tighten your nut down as tight as you can get it. 1/2 inch wrench for the nut that fits a 5/16 bolt. I'm going to take 2 more nuts and thread on here just to give it some bulk for where I'm going to attach it to the other part of the tube.
And are you brazing that part?
No, I don't have enough oxygen.
Okay.
oxygen rolls up fast.
Yep. I'm just going to take a hacksaw and cut the bolts off right past the nuts because I don't need that much bolt. Okay, at this point, I'm going to take this outside and I'm going to braze this nut in place on my clamp. I'm doing that outside because it requires a MAP gas and oxygen torch, and that is not safe to use indoors, not without proper ventilation, and I don't want to burn up my floor. So I'm going to take this outside, braze that in place, and then I will come back in and we will continue. Okay, and there we go. The nut has been brazed on. I think actually partially even welded. And our knob screws through. Just like so. I'm going to take my 5/16 washer, put it on my knob, open my 1/2 inch washers, take one of them out, I've got a foam bowl here. I'm going to mix up some JB Quick steel reinforced epoxy.
You can buy it at Walmart, Lowe's.
It's about $5 for the tubes together. You've got the steel tube, as they call it. And the hardener. You mix them in equal parts. Use a non-metal implement to stir it. Mix it together really well. Don't take too long mixing it because the JB Quick will begin to set in about 5 to 6 minutes. You get a dark gray paste. I'm going to use this to attach my 1/2-inch washer. Just a few small dabs around it. On the back side here to my bar plate. I've already put my 5/16 washer on my bolt so that it is not going to be in my way. I'm going to put a very small amount of the JB Quick down here on the very end of the bolt, just around the last thread on it. That's going to ensure that my 5/16 E-clip.
But you need to put the bar on first? No?
Nope. Will stay in place at the very end of the bolt. Now we'll need to let those two sit for about 10 minutes or so they start to cure. While that part's curing, I'm going to take some more of the JB Quick and smear it on the nuts on my bolt that's holding my clamp together, and is also going to be my attachment point to my conduit for the rest of my adjustable point. Take the conduit. Because of the size of the nuts, they make it so that you have very little play inside the conduit. Slide the conduit on and hold it in place for the few minutes that it's going to take for it to set. Since I'm doing these at the same time, I'm going to make sure I keep my clamp position so that my nut does not end up in the JB weld on the end of my bolt. Okay, now we took a little bit of a break and let the epoxy at least set so that these aren't going to simply just come apart while I'm working with them. So again, epoxy the piece of conduit to the rest of the clamp, put a little bit on the end of the bolt so that the E-clip does not come off. Also epoxied the 1/2-inch washer to the clamp bar. Now I need to mix up just a little bit more epoxy, not a whole lot, because the next step doesn't take very much at all. other end of our popsicle stick here.
High-tech tools. High-tech tools.
Mix it up good. And we're just gonna dab a little bit on the top side of our 1/2 inch washer. We don't want to get it too close to the hole in the middle because we don't want it to squeeze out into the middle. If it squeezes out any, we want it to go to the outside because we don't want it to get on that E-clip and bind everything up. Get another popsicle stick here. Shave the edges off so I have a good squared off tip. So I can make sure that there's no epoxy in the middle. Then carefully place it in the clamp. And thread our bolt in so that our 5/8 inch washer sits on top of the 1/2 inch washer. And we're just going to put a little bit of pressure there to seat it in place. Make sure that none of the epoxy squeezed out to the inside. That's not what we wanted to do. And then we'll just leave that screwed down so that that can cure. And we'll move on to the next step of the operation. Again, it's easier to tighten the screws up if we screw them all the way in. And we're taking the one screw out because we don't need the little screw. We're going to use our other lever bar. When you first screw these in, they can be a little tight, but if you run them all the way in and back out, just like with the screws, it'll clear the threads, and then it's much easier to work. Make sure your set screws backed all the way out when you put it on your conduit. And you can line these up however you want to so that your adjustment lever here is wherever around the clamp you want it to be, and then tighten down the set screw. Just like that. And then thread it on. And there it is. It doesn't move unless we want it to.
You can use that for flipping over your work to get to the back, or to set it at whatever angle
Set it
is
whatever
most
angle
comfortable.
you want to work. If you need to get to the back of your work, give it a partial twist. You can flip it back and forth, readjust your angle, and then tighten it down. And say you're stitching, and you need to get up and refill your glass. Just loosen your lever, swing it out away from you, and you're clear from able to get up and go refill your glass or whatever you need to do. And then when you come back, swing it back around to where you need it, tighten your adjustment lever down, and you're solid again. Despite looking very complicated, it is actually quite easy. And depending on how much adjustment you want this way will depend on how long you want to make this piece of conduit here and how long you want this portion of your bar. Because my chair has very wide arms, I went ahead and just bent my bar in the middle. If my chair had taller arms that weren't as wide, I could have bent it more towards this end and had more vertical adjustment. But as it is, I have quite a bit. So that is how the stand is built. Okay. Now, with the clamp the way it is, it will hold Q-snap frames very easily. You can use it either with the knob up or on the back side, either one. That is up to you.
I found that it depends on if I have my stand on my left or right, if I want the knob on the top side or the back.
But you just slide the Q-snap in and tighten the knob down until it grips nice and tight. You don't have to tighten it very hard, just enough to keep it in place.
Angle.
And then you can flip your work. It's sliding a little bit because I didn't tighten it down a whole lot.
There's nothing between it and my material.
Right. This is mostly just to demonstrate anyway. So that's how it works with the Q-snap. Either way. Or to use it with a scroll frame. If your scroll frame stretcher bars are small enough, you can simply put them inside the clamp. If you have a really long scroll frame and you're worried about the balance, you can use a scroll frame adapter. I made this one. It is a piece of 1 inch by 1/2 inch poplar. This one I cut about 12 inches. It's the same size as my frame pretty much. I drilled a slot hole down here so that it has a little bit of adjustment. This side's just the clamp. These pieces are 1/2 inch conduit hangers. Get them in the electrical department at Lowe's or wherever. a pair of 5/16 by 1.5" bolts, a couple of nuts, 4 washers. Pretty simple. You put it behind your scroll frame, and I have my work on my frame backwards from what I wanted to because I didn't pay attention to which side I sewed the strips on. But you simply tighten down the bolts. Normally I would have a wing nut on the back, but I didn't have enough wing nuts for both of our scroll frames and the adapter. And my adapter is actually a little bit short for this scroll frame, but it works.
It's the one you made to go with my scroll frame, which is shorter.
Mm-hmm. Tighten them up. Not exceptionally tight on this one, but it works. When you're using the adapter, you'll want to make sure that your clamp is flipped around so the knob is on the back. And you put the clamp into the frame, you put the adapter into the clamp, and then tighten it up so that it holds your clamp. And this way, if you have a longer scroll frame, you can position your adapter wherever along the frame you need to counterbalance. If you're working towards the right side of your frame and you've got a 24-inch frame, you can put the adapter in the middle, closer to the right side, and then your area you're not working is countered over here, so it's not putting extra weight on the end of your stand and making it want to flip up.
Which we added weight to my stand by getting an old weight bench weight that would go on a bar and just sliding it around the conduit so it sits around it on the base to add extra weight.
And I went ahead and put the little clip pin in place just to show how it works. You can loosen that up, and with the pin it doesn't drop down like it did before.
It swivels very easily.
It does. And I can raise it part of the way, clamp it down, and it's not going to go anywhere while I'm working on it. When I get ready to move it, it will drop some, but again, I drilled holes at a reasonable distance apart so that I can have adjustment points so it's not going to just drop all the way down.
I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I am also in the Facebook group Stitch Mania, so you can ask me questions there. Have a great evening.